Here are some movie recommendations inspired by Hayley Williams' album Ego Death at a Bachelorette Party. The song Ice in My OJ reminds me of the film Ladies and Gentlemen, The Fabulous Stains, because I feel like this song has a lot to do with Hayley's relationship with fame, having gotten into the industry at such a young age, because she interpolates one of the first songs she recorded when she worked on Mammoth City Messengers and screams, "I'm in a band" in the chorus. But it's especially the second verse that made me think of this movie. I'd elaborate, but a lot of it has to do with the second half of the movie, and I don't want to spoil it. The music video for Glum reminds me of Le Bonheur because of the contrast between the dark melancholic lyrics and the bright visuals, because so much of it is outside in nature or inside with the sun shining through a window, and it's got this gorgeous saturated color palette with her hair in a bright shade of yellow. And this movie has such bright, colorful visuals that creates a juxtaposition between the aesthetic and the narrative. But also, I think the lyric "In the wake of your sunshine, I've never felt so glum" fits really well with this film. The song Kill Me reflects on how eldest daughters often bear the burden of having to break the cycle of generational trauma. And the movie that I think best exemplifies that is Autumn Sonata, another movie about generational trauma where a woman may not be the eldest daughter, but similarly feels like she has to take care of everyone else, is Short Term 12. But this one also came to mind because the song Whim seems like it's about someone who has a tendency to self-sabotage, especially in relationships. The lyric, "Searching for a bloodstain, bandages are clean," conveys this idea of someone who's been hurt so many times that they just come to expect it. And I think that also applies to the protagonist of this film. Mirtazapine is a tricky one because I feel like so many movies portray antidepressants as making you feel numb and that being a bad thing, instead of focusing on how if you find the right medication, it can make a world of difference and how it can be a lot of trial and error. So I was trying to think of movies that don't villainize medication or act like getting off your meds is the solution. Prozac Nation was the first one that came to mind because, like this song, it has an antidepressant in its name. Silver Linings Playbook came to mind because the characters discuss how they had to try so many different medications and deal with an array of side effects before finding something that works. And I know this is a TV show, not a movie, but I think BoJack Horseman is one of the best depictions of someone going on antidepressants because weight gain tends to be a side effect and sometimes that rarely gets addressed. So when Diane goes on antidepressants and gains weight but starts doing better, that really stuck out to me. And obviously in the song Mirtazapine, Hayley talks about how her meds help her eat and sleep. Disappearing Man made me think of The Invisible Man at first in an extremely literal sense, but it feels like a song about unrequited love, specifically the kind where you have the person at one point, but then they just disappear like it's nothing. So that makes me think of Letter from an Unknown Woman. Love Me Different reminds me of Plus One because of the friends to lovers trope, and then the man gradually starts to express doubts. But I also wanted to pick a movie about a woman who learns to love herself, and I feel like a lot of the themes I just described can be found in Now Voyager. Between the generational trauma, a daughter breaking the cycle, a woman who self-sabotages because she's afraid of getting hurt because that's all she's ever known. And this one might not include medication, but it does depict therapy, and Hayley sings about endless hours of therapy in Love Me Different. Brotherly Hate seems to be about the tension between familial or fraternal bonds, whether it's literally about brothers or just close friends or family. It explores this love-hate dynamic between two people who are pretty similar, and the first couple films that explore tensions between brothers that came to mind were Rocco and His Brothers, Dead Ringers, and The Straight Story. Hayley specifically mentions Titanic and negative self-talk, but that song feels like it's about someone who constantly has negative thoughts about themselves and is trying to overcome that. And that kind of makes me think of Good Will Hunting, which also explores some of the themes I already mentioned. Ego Death at a Bachelorette Party kind of reminds me of Wild Rose because it sounds like Hayley is singing about how she wanted to be in California but ended up going back to Nashville, and how she experienced a sort of ego death and doesn't need to have these big ambitions. And she's content being the biggest star at these bars in Nashville, whether they're owned by some racist country singer or a bachelorette party bar or a karaoke bar. And I think Wild Rose delves into similar themes, but I don't want to give too much away. But in contrast to the song, the protagonist of this film dreams of going to Nashville instead of Nashville being the place she goes home to. Hard makes me think of Honora because it describes someone who's emotionally guarded and trying to maintain a tough exterior, refusing to be vulnerable or open up to anyone in order to protect themselves from getting hurt. I know Discovery Channel samples the Bloodhound Gang's The Bad Touch, but the second verse is also a reference to a line in Jumanji where Robin Williams' character says, 26 years ago we started playing a little game and now we're all gonna sit down and we're gonna finish it, and guess what? Your turn. So between Jumanji and The Bad Touch, there's this very animalistic imagery, and it seems to describe a relationship that isn't working no matter how hard the people are trying. And that combined with the first verse makes me think of Possession. And this one's more recent, but it also makes me think of Die My Love. Hayley did an entire breakdown of the meaning behind the song True Believer, and at one point in that, she mentions the brutal attack on peaceful protesters in Selma, Alabama. So naturally, I'm going to recommend the movie Selma. And the beginning of True Believer details gentrification in Nashville. But when I think of gentrification in movies, I think of The Last Black Man in San Francisco. She also mentioned The Penguin Show because of the lyric What Lives On Southern Gotham. So I'm going to recommend The Batman since The Penguin is a spin-off of this movie. And there's a line about how they put up chain link fences underneath bridges to prevent unhoused people from sleeping there, which makes me think of Vagabond. With the lyric Till the Roots, she capitalized and spelled Till with 2 L's as a reference to Emmett Till, so I'm gonna recommend Till as well. Imagine if I made this whole video and didn't recommend The Life Aquatic when one of the songs is literally titled Zissou and features multiple references to the movie. Dreamgirl in Shibuya reminds me of Lost in Translation for the way she describes sipping on Japanese whiskey in the lobby bar. Actually, a lot of the imagery in this song calls to mind scenes from Lost in Translation. I know this isn't what Blood Bros is about, but it makes me think of Little Fish because of the symbolism with water and the description of 2 fishes flipping on dry land, but also how she asks, would you come back to get me if you had the chance again? And I feel like this movie depicts that same sort of unshakable bond where maybe eventually you'll find your way back to someone. In I Won't Quit on You, she says, now I'm an alien to you, and then later sings Phone Home Baby, Everything Changed, which is a blatant nod to E.T. But the space imagery, the bittersweet longing, and the fact that water is used as a motif a lot throughout the album made me think of Solaris. While I'm on the topic of sci-fi movies, the opening of Parachute made me think of Arrival. Even though I know the lyrics are Hayley imagining a future with someone and what their daughter would have looked like, just this idea of envisioning a daughter makes me think of the opening of Arrival. And Arrival asks the question, if you could see your entire life laid out in front of you and know that something is going to cause you unimaginable heartache, would you choose to still go through with it? Is the love and joy that precedes the pain worth it? And that's the vibe I got from this album as a whole. It sounds like Hayley is enduring a lot of pain, but it's a pain that she feels is worth it. But I don't know her. I could very much be wrong. In Parachute, she also says my spider senses, so I'm gonna throw in Spider-Man. But there's more to the spider symbolism than that because she talks about building a web and the rain washing away the life she's weaving, which makes me think of Enemy, where spiders may or may not represent commitment. But if we want to go back to the Spider-Man thing, then I could also throw in The Amazing Spider-Man 2 because of the chorus where she sings, I thought you were gonna catch me, I never stopped falling for you. Although I guess if I'm gonna recommend The Amazing Spider-Man 2, I also have to recommend The Amazing Spider-Man first. My favorite part of this entire album is the second verse of Parachute, which paints such a vivid picture. And I think the hallmark of great art is when that art captures such specific emotions tied to a unique situation that's rich with such intricate details, so that it makes me feel those emotions so deeply, even though I've literally never even been in a remotely similar situation in my entire life. And this verse is a perfect example of that. If I had to compare that to a movie, I know it's not exactly the same thing, but the lyric, you were at my wedding, I was broken, you were drunk, you could have told me not to do it, I would have run, makes me think of Before Sunset when Jesse asks Celine, why weren't you there? And he says, I wish you would have been, our lives might have been so much different, because it's expressing this idea that this person had the power to prevent you from marrying the wrong person. But again, if I'm gonna recommend Before Sunset, then I gotta recommend Before Sunrise first, even though what I just said was technically a spoiler. Speaking of spoilers, I also think it's really powerful how the lyrics go from watch me fall through the sky to watch me fly, because as devastating as this song is, it feels like there's a bit of hope there that she'll be alright on her own. And I have a letterbox list titled Movies Where the Woman Ends Up Alone But We're Not Sad About It, meaning without a love interest. However, it feels like spoilers to recommend movies based on that point specifically, but I did already recommend a few of them in this video so far. She says I'm not a waterbender in the song Good Old Days, which is obviously a reference to Avatar: The Last Airbender. I know that's a TV show, not a movie, but it's such a clear nod that I felt like I should include it. In Good Old Days, she clearly sings about making music with someone she dated, like in the line, 'cause I miss you, miss kissing your face, blissin' out to music we made. But she also describes continuing to write songs about them even after they split with the line, have to get it out of my system, don't like songs about you, don't listen. So I want to recommend some movies where people who are romantically involved either make music together, about each other, or just both happen to be musicians. And the ones that came to mind are Band-Aid, The Thing Called Love, The Ballad of Wallace Island, The Broken Circle Breakdown, Once, A Star Is Born, Inside Llewyn Davis, and Begin Again. And this is a TV show, not a movie, but Daisy Jones and the Six fits the vibe. Plus, Good Old Days has a direct reference to Stevie Nicks, and it feels like she was a big inspiration for the book this show was based on. Speaking of Good Old Days, the lyric What's in a Name is a reference to Romeo and Juliet, but there are so many adaptations of Romeo and Juliet, I'm just going to go with the 1996 movie because this list is already pure chaos. The lyric I just want to love you but you won't let me is most likely a Fleetwood Mac reference, but it kind of makes me think of the movie movie Closer when Natalie Portman's character says, "Why won't you let me love you?" There are actually quite a few lyrics from this album that remind me of lines her character says in this movie. I know Showbiz is about a romantic relationship, but I already listed quite a few films about romantic relationships between musicians. But there were two other movies that came to mind when I listened to this song that aren't about romantic relationships. The way she describes, "I want to do it again, I want to dance in the strobe lights, I want to choke on the smoke and feel your eyes on me," kind of reminds me of how Aftersun uses the imagery of dancing to convey the memories of someone and how you wish you could go back and how you wish they were still here. And there's a finality to Showbiz, probably because it's the final song and the exit stage left line, and that notion paired with the imagery kind of calls to mind all that jazz. But yeah, comment and let me know which movies you'd associate with Hayley Williams' album Ego Death at a Bachelorette Party, and if you're a fan of the album, comment and let me know which song is your favorite.